Great. I'm very fortunate to be interviewing Dr. Renee Liang, who is a paediatrician. She's also a playwright and she's a poet. So that is a remarkable Renaissance woman combination, and she's about to have a baby. Not today, but next week. So Renee, it's great to have you interviewed. And can I say, last week, it was just great to have you, or the last session, it was great to have you contributing your ideas on how New Zealand Asian leaders can grow Asian tourism in New Zealand. Tell me about you. Where did you come from and your upbringing in New Zealand?
So I was born here. Yes, but my parents came from Hong Kong, so I was brought up in quite a traditional Chinese household, and then of course when I went out the door I tried to become Kiwi, not altogether successfully either way, so it wasn't a very good necessarily, it took me a while to get the hang of being a Chinese daughter, shall we say.
Yes, no, understood. Probably not obedient enough.
Yes.
In the traditional sense. But did you marry Chinese or did you marry Pākehā?
No, I actually got in trouble for dating a Pākehā. I was the first in the family to date a Pākehā boy.
Right, yes.
Got in big trouble.
No, understood. Well, now you're a big hotshot paediatrician, but you're also a playwright and a poet. So just tell me about the contribution you're making to New Zealand.
Well, I think that what my doctor training did was to train me how to listen to stories, because you know the first thing a paediatrician or a doctor does when a patient walks into the door is to take a history, which is to listen to someone's story and then to try and make sense of it to lead on to some sort of diagnosis or solution or whatever. As a writer, I feel that I'm looking at the other side, so I'm not only listening and writing down the stories, I'm also telling them back. And again, I'm processing it in some way to try and make sense of it for myself. But at the same time, I think I do feel that my plays and my poetry and my other writing do also tell a story back to New Zealanders.
And what is the story that you're trying to tell?
Well, it varies. I mean, at its heart, it's a universal story. So it's about family. And the importance of community and of love, but that is from my own personal viewpoint, which is, despite all my best efforts as a little kid, very strongly influenced by my heritage. So as a Chinese New Zealander, I am telling stories which come from quite a Chinese New Zealand viewpoint. So they're telling, you know, the migrant story, if you like, but also telling the story of growing up in New Zealand as somebody with a foot in more than one culture.
Understood. So you've grown up in this environment where you've bridged two cultures.
Yes.
Do you think New Zealand's ready for its future? We're now 1 in 4 Asians. And that together with Pacifica and Maori, we are moving towards a non-white majority. I mean,
yes.
Comment on that.
Well, I think that people are definitely coming to terms with it and becoming much more interested, which is actually one reason why my writing career took off at the time it did. So I've really only been writing seriously for about 6 years, but from pretty much the moment I started writing, my work gained quite a lot of attention, probably more than it should have, given, you know, it was still at quite an emergent level. But for good or bad, people have paid attention to what I've been writing about, and perhaps that shows that they're ready to embrace the Asian Kiwi story as also a New Zealand story.
So tell me about the Asian Kiwi story. What is that story? And
Well,
how is it different from other stories?
Well, it was very interesting because I was chatting to a Pacific leader a few days ago, and she wasn't aware that of how long the Chinese history in New Zealand is.
So we have people in New Zealand Asian leaders who are 5th generation.
Absolutely,
New Zealand
yeah.
Chinese.
So the 1800s was when the first Chinese New Zealanders came, and they were actually Chinese New Zealanders in that some of them were sojourners, but a lot of them at around the 1850 level, they decided that they were actually New Zealanders. They wanted to make a future for themselves in this country, and so that actually predates, Pacific migration, and I do feel that also from my wearing my health researcher hat,
Yes.
that perhaps people don't realise how many diverse and different stories there are among the Asian New Zealander group.
Mm-hmm.
So they have, you know, Asian New Zealanders are often seen as very affluent,
Mm-hmm.
and you kind of leave them alone and they kind of do well by themselves, but that's actually not the case.
Mm.
And in fact they do have very strong needs, good ideas, and I think that perhaps New Zealanders do need to firstly embrace them as New Zealanders who have a vested interest in New Zealand, but also as people who can use their experience to benefit New Zealand. And not just from the point of view of, well, they're Asian so they can speak Chinese, so they can connect to China for us.
Sure.
Because I think that's you know, that's only a very small segment of the population.
Right. So just tell me about then what we can add, because a lot of people say that, oh yes, I suppose they speak Mandarin, they could interpret for us. I mean, what else do you think are the benefits of having, you know, Asian New Zealand leaders involved in trying to help the interface with Asia?
Well, for a start, we've grown up, even if we're born here, even if we're fifth generation, we've grown up living in two cultures.
That's true.
So we have that understanding of what it's like to, well, have a foot in two different worlds. That tends to give you a really different viewpoint. And in an era where they're valuing diversity in all aspects of leadership, that the diversity actually comes naturally to people who've had to deal with living in two cultures. I mean, I write about this, but actually, you know, when you've grown up knowing that no matter how strong you are in yourself and your own identity, when you step out that door, people are not going to necessarily take you at face value, if you want to use that word.
Or maybe they do take you too much at face value.
Too much at face value,
I
yes.
mean, you're just a Chinese person.
Yes,
so,
exactly, and they can't tell.
well, they presume you can't speak English, and so they just ignore you.
Absolutely, yes. Whereas, of course, there are people like me who, despite our best efforts, we don't speak Chinese, but we have a degree in English. So, I mean, I think that so, you know, once people see past that and they realise that actually you're just a person, and you bring with you your life experiences and all your training, they can then put you. They can then take your advice and your knowledge and use it.
So when you look into the future, and I know that's not necessarily what writers do, but you are thinkers, and you are thinkers about different aspects of the novel, different aspects of narration. I mean, when you look into the future and you see which way we're going, I mean, 1 in 4 now, moving to 1 in 3, what do you see in terms of the future of New Zealand and its interface with Asia, and the Asian New Zealanders who are here?
Well, from a very personal point of view, of course, I have mixed race children, and this is increasingly going to be the future. We know this because also of I'm involved in a longitudinal study which is charting New Zealand children and their families, and so we know that not only are we going to have more Asians, we're actually going to have more people of mixed heritage, and I think it's going to be increasingly less important whether you're Asian or Māori or Pacific, you know, which one group you identify with, and it's going to be more common to identify with multiple groups and to draw on the wisdom and traditions from all these cultural groups. So I do feel that, you know, even though we do need to look to Asia and our relationship with Asia, because after all we're in this geographical region, we also need to look at the fact that we're going to be more and more interconnected with the whole world, really, and that geography is going to be less and less important. It's more going to be about the lines of relationship. So, and you know, I'm a child of the internet age.
There you are, yes.
So for me, it's less important where I am geographically, now, and I'm much more likely to collaborate across countries these days.
Well, I love the fact that you've got involved in New Zealand Asian Leaders. It's absolutely fabulous. So tell me, why do we need organisations like this?
Well, firstly, I think it's a really good idea for us to be able to talk to each other. And, you know, I think that the fact that you've taken this initiative, but not only have you just sort of, it's easy enough to get a group of people together and make a list of people, but you know, you've also been very, very active in organising events where we can actually meet together and talk. And not only that, but once we meet each other, then hopefully we'll actually be able to make all those really important one-on-one connections as well that allow us to work together effectively as a group. For somebody like me who's perhaps you know, my background is in science and the humanities, and so I have had less opportunity to meet business leaders. So for me personally, I think it's a great advantage for me to try and understand a little bit about how business thinks, how business works, and also a little bit more about governance, which I'm really just taking the first steps in. And somebody like, you know, I come from a really different leadership background, one that's sort of community-based, NGO-based, so I think it's good for me to be exposed to that kind of thinking, but also vice versa. Sure.
So in terms of your vision for the contribution that you want to make to New Zealand, Renee, what is that?
Oh gosh.
Small question, just to finish off.
You mean apart from population growth?
Well, no, it was good. I'm glad I told you to procreate. Clearly that's been a successful strategy.
Yes. So I think that, you know, I really think that my contribution to New Zealand is to tell the New Zealand story, or at least one side of it.
Yeah, no, I think it's an important story. I think it's a story that many people haven't heard of. And when I read your interview with the New Zealand Herald, I just had to get in touch because I thought, I think this is the only other woman in New Zealand who's had a very similar experience to me. So thank you for telling that story. We're really grateful to have you involved in New Zealand Asian Leaders. That mentoring and I think that role modelling is important. So thank you.
Thank you.